She has the highest grades in school. Every test, every quiz, every exam. Haruka Miyoshi doesn't just pass, she dominates. Teachers use her name as an example. Classmates copy her notes. The principal mentioned her at last year's award ceremony twice. She's that girl. But here's the thing nobody knows. For the past 3 weeks, Haruka has been failing her math quizzes on purpose. Not by a lot, just enough. Just enough to keep one specific thing going. Her tutoring sessions with a boy most people don't even notice. His name is Kenji Noda. And this is where the story gets interesting. Kenji sits by the window in Class 2B, third row, last seat. He doesn't raise his hand, he doesn't eat lunch with a big group. He brings a paperback novel every single day and reads it like the rest of the class doesn't exist. Nobody dislikes him, but nobody really sees him either. He just exists quietly in the background, which honestly is exactly how he likes it. The only thing unusual about Kenji is this. He's secretly incredible at math. Not in a showy way, in a, wait, why does that actually make perfect sense way? His explanations are simple, calm, like he's just telling you something obvious that you somehow missed. Their teacher, Mr. Ota, figured this out during a group activity last month. And when the school launched a peer tutoring program, Mr. Ota signed Kenji up without even asking him first. Kenji was annoyed about that. He was even more annoyed when he found out his assigned student was Haruka Miyoshi. Her? He remembers thinking. She doesn't need a tutor. She probably knows more than I do. The first session was awkward. They sat across from each other in the library after school. Haruka had her notebook open. Kenji had his hands in his pockets, clearly wondering why he was there. So, he said flatly, what do you actually need help with? Haruka pointed to a problem on her worksheet, a quadratic equation, medium difficulty. Kenji glanced at it, then glanced at her. Something in his expression said, really? But he didn't say it out loud. He just pulled up a chair and started walking her through it. And here's the thing, he was good. Not textbook good, not let me recite the formula good. He explained it like a story, like the numbers had a reason for doing what they did. Haruka found herself actually listening, which almost never happens because usually she already knows everything before the teacher finishes the sentence. But Kenji explained it differently, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like the smartest person in the room. She felt like a student. It was uncomfortable, and somehow she loved it. The session ended after 40 minutes. Haruka walked home that night thinking about something that had nothing to do with quadratic equations. She kept replaying the part where Kenji looked at her, not like she was Haruka Miyoshi, top student, but just like a girl who got a problem wrong. Nothing more, nothing less. No pressure, no expectations, just here's how it works. She didn't realize how tired she was of being looked at like a trophy until someone finally stopped doing it. She failed the next quiz on purpose 3 days later. Not badly, she got a 61, enough to justify another session, enough to make it look like the first one hadn't fully worked yet. Mr. Oda frowned when he handed it back. Miyoshi-san, are you feeling okay? Yes, sensei, I think I just need a little more time with the material. He nodded slowly, scheduled another session with Kenji. Haruka walked back to her seat and kept her face completely neutral, but deep down, something small and warm was sitting in her chest. She was already thinking about what question she'd pretend not to know next. The second session felt different, less awkward. Still quiet, but a comfortable kind of quiet. The kind where nobody feels the need to fill the silence with unnecessary words. Kenji showed up with a different energy this time. Less reluctant. He pulled out his notebook, flipped to a clean page, and just said, "Okay, show me where you got stuck." Haruka pointed to another problem. Kenji looked at it for 2 seconds. Then he started explaining. And again, that feeling came back. That strange, warm, I'm actually paying attention feeling. She noticed small things about him during that session. The way he tapped his pen twice before speaking. The way he never made her feel stupid for not understanding, even when the concept was simple. The way he'd sometimes pause mid-explanation and say, "Actually, let me say that differently," like her understanding mattered more than his being right. Nobody had ever done that with her before. Usually, people just waited for Haruka to be impressive. They didn't try to reach her, they just stood back and watched. Kenji wasn't watching. He was just talking to her, like a normal person. She didn't know how much she needed that until right now. By the third session, a small routine had formed. They met Tuesdays and Thursdays in the library. Same table, second from the back near the window. Haruka always arrived first. Kenji always arrived exactly on time, never early, never late. He'd sit down, she'd open her notebook, they'd work. But somewhere between the second and third session, the dynamic quietly shifted. It stopped being just about math. Kenji started asking small questions. Not personal ones, just casual. Did you eat when it was past 6? Is that a new notebook? When she switched covers. Small things, throwaway things. But Haruka held on to every single one. She started preparing for sessions differently. She'd spend 20 minutes choosing what to wear, then remind herself it was just tutoring and change back into something normal. She'd rehearse small things to say, then feel embarrassed for rehearsing and decide to say nothing. Deep down, she knew what was happening. She just wasn't ready to say it out loud yet. The problem started in week 3. Haruka got her mouth test back and froze. 94 out of 100. She stared at it. That wasn't supposed to happen. She'd been careful. Careful to miss just enough. Careful to stay in that comfortable middle zone where the sessions kept getting scheduled and nobody asked too many questions. But somewhere between pretending and actually listening, she'd learned the material. Of course she had. Kenji was too good at explaining. She couldn't help it. She sat at her desk quietly panicking. Because a 94 meant Mr. Oto would probably end the sessions. She couldn't let that happen. So she made a decision. On the next quiz, she bombed it. Not a 61 this time, a 57. It was riskier, she knew that. A 57 from the top student in class would raise eyebrows. She told herself she'd explain it as stress, end-of-term pressure. She'd done it before, made herself seem more human when people started treating her like a machine. She knew how to manage the story. What she didn't plan for was Kenji's reaction. When he saw the quiz score at the start of their next session, something changed in his face. Not confusion, not concern, something quieter than that. He looked at the paper for a long moment. Then he looked at her. Haruka kept her expression steady. "Okay," he said slowly. "Let's go through it." He walked her through every wrong answer. Patient as always, calm as always. But he was looking at her differently now. Not unkindly, just carefully. Like he was reading something between the lines that she hadn't meant to leave there. That night, Haruka lay in bed staring at the ceiling. She kept replaying that look. He knows, something inside her whispered. Or he's starting to. She told herself it didn't matter, that she'd just be more careful next time, space the wrong answers out better, make the mistakes look more random. But a different part of her, the part she kept trying to ignore, felt something close to relief. Like maybe getting caught wasn't the worst thing that could happen. Like maybe she wanted him to see it. She pulled her blanket up and closed her eyes. "Don't be stupid, Haruka." But the feeling didn't go away. It just got warmer. Tuesday came. She walked into the library and Kenji was already there. He was never early. He was sitting at their usual table, second from the back near the window, with 2 cups of vending machine tea, one in front of his seat, one in front of hers. Haruka stopped in the doorway. He looked up, met her eyes. "You looked cold last time," he said simply, then looked back down at his notebook. Haruka stood there for one extra second. Then she walked over, sat down, wrapped both hands around the warm cup. She didn't say thank you out loud, but her chest was so full she couldn't have found the words anyway. He noticed. He noticed and he didn't make it a big deal. And somehow that made it the biggest deal in the world. She opened her notebook. He started explaining. And for the first time, she didn't plan a single wrong answer. She just sat there, warm cup in her hands, and let herself enjoy it. It was a Thursday when everything cracked open. Haruka had been careful, more careful than before. Wrong answers spaced out, mistakes that looked natural, a small slip here, a careless error there, nothing that screamed on purpose. She thought she'd gotten away with it. She hadn't. They were halfway through the session when Kenji stopped. Just stopped. Mid-explanation. Pen down. Quiet. Haruka looked up from her notebook. He was staring at her worksheet. Not reading it, just staring at it the way someone stares at something when they've already made up their mind about it. Then he said, very calmly, "You already know how to do this one." Haruka's heart dropped straight to the floor. "What do you mean?" she said. Steady voice, neutral face. She'd practiced this face for years. Kenji topped the problem with one finger. "This is the same method from 3 sessions ago. You solved harder versions of this on your own." He paused. "You got this one wrong." "I made a mistake." "Haruka." It was the first time he'd used her first name. She stopped talking. He wasn't angry. That was the thing that made it worse. If he was angry, she could have defended herself, built a wall, walked away clean. But his voice was just quiet and a little tired. And underneath that, something that sounded almost like it hurt. "How long?" he asked. She didn't answer. "How long have you been doing this on purpose?" The library was completely silent. Somewhere behind them, a chair scraped the floor. Someone coughed. The sounds felt very far away. Haruka looked down at her notebook, at the fake mistake she'd written in careful pencil, at 3 weeks of small, calculated wrong answers staring back at her. She could still lie. She knew how. She was good at it. But Kenji was looking at her with those calm, careful eyes. And something inside her was just tired. Tired of being perfect. Tired of managing the story. Tired of sitting across from the one person who made her feel normal and performing for him anyway. She closed her notebook. "Since the 2nd week," she said quietly. Kenji didn't react. He just nodded once, like part of him already knew and was waiting for the other part to catch up. "How long?" he asked. And that was the question, wasn't it? Why? Haruka stared at the closed notebook in front of her. She thought about saying something smart, something that explained it logically, something that made her sound less like a girl who'd been sabotaging her own grades just to sit in a library with a boy who brought her tea without being asked. Instead, what came out was, "Because you're the only person who talks to me like I'm just a person." The silence that followed was a different kind of silence. Softer, heavier. Kenji didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, very quietly, "That's the reason?" "That's the reason." He looked at her, really looked. Not at the class rep, not at the top student, just at her. Tired eyes, closed notebook, hands flat on the table like she was bracing for something. And then, slowly, something in his expression shifted. Not pity, not embarrassment. Something that looked a lot like recognition. Like he understood exactly what she meant because some part of him felt it too. "You could have just talked to me without the wrong answers," he said finally. Haruka let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "I didn't know how to do that." "In failing quizzes was easier?" "It gave me a reason to be here." He was quiet again. "Then you don't need a reason." 3 words, said simply. No drama, no big gesture. Just, you don't need a reason. Haruka felt something loosen in her chest, something she hadn't realized she'd been holding tight for weeks. She didn't cry, she wasn't that kind of girl, but her eyes went a little warm and she looked away toward the window so he wouldn't see. They didn't leave right away. They stayed at that table, second from the back, near the window, for another hour. Not doing math, just talking. Slowly at first, then easier. She told him about the pressure of being the top student. He told him about preferring books to people and how that wasn't loneliness so much as just preference, though sometimes he wasn't totally sure about the difference. It was the most honest conversation Haruka had in months, maybe longer. When they finally packed up and walked out of the library, the sky outside was that deep orange right before dark. Kenji held the door open. Haruka walked through. They stood outside for a second, not quite walking away yet. "Same time Tuesday?" he asked. Haruka looked at him. "I'm going to get the answers right from now on," she said. The corner of his mouth moved, almost a smile. "I know. So the sessions will probably end." He looked at her for a moment, then looked away, toward the orange sky. "Not necessarily," he said quietly. And he started walking. Haruka stood there watching him go and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Something light, something real, something that had absolutely nothing to do with grades. She still doesn't know if he meant what she thinks he meant, but for the first time in a long time, she actually wants to find out. If you want to see what happens when Haruka shows up to the next session with a perfect score and Kenji shows up anyway, drop a comment below. And if this story hit different, subscribe, or one step closer to 1,000, and every single sub actually means something.